This is F.D.Recovery, where we interview addicts and alcoholics.
Our aim is that through this podcast, we might help you on your journey of recovery.
Thank you for listening. Hello, this is Frank with F.D.Recovery, your host. And this portion of the podcast is the weekly intention. All right. It's been a busy week. Sorry, guys. My head is a little frazzled, but we're going to continue onward and upwards. So last week, if my brain can catch up with me, it was higher power. Yeah, there we go.
A good old HP.
HP. So typically, if you guys are unfamiliar with the way the weekly intention goes, is we each week we go through either a topic or a spiritual principle tied into recovery, and we try to either work it in the week, that the spiritual principle we choose or the topic, and then we go over it in a recap, and then we start with the new one for the week. Last week. This week will be clarity. I know it doesn't sound kind of like a spiritual principle, but in my recovery, there's definitely a lot of work that ends up leading towards it, and also. But before we dive into that, I don't want to start diving into it without recapping a higher power. And also, I have with me my lovely wife.
My name is Shelley, and I am an alcoholic and Frank's wife. In case you didn't catch it. So higher power. Usually I like to start off with, how my higher power worked, that spiritual principle in my life, but seeing how it's actually a higher power. I tell you that the way I worked it throughout the week was I kept tapping in. The way I envision this whole higher power business or God, however your brain has to spin it for you to cope with it. I see it as kind of a source you tap into and just kind of keep the juices going. And it's the same thing as if, I'm a busy person, so I do a lot of stuff on my phone. And it's kind of the same concept. You got to have a plug nearby just to get some juice, and that's kind of how it works spiritually. If you don't tap into that higher source, then you start bugging out, because I know when my battery's low on my phone, things don't work as well. I have to throw it into low power mode, and if not, then it'll just completely shut off on me. And that's kind of how my spiritual life works as well. So I do remember throughout my week, I just kept going, all right, God, just tap it in like that, saying, all right, higher power, I know that you're in control. Because step 1, 2, and 3 is kind of how I tap in with my higher power is I'm powerless. I'm now in my insanity, right? Because the way it was broke down with step 2 with me is being brought back to sanity, right? Which implies insanity. So willing to believe that a higher power can restore us to sanity, right? And that for sure implies my insanity in the whole bit. And because that's the place we're trying to get back to, is that sanity, at least when we're in the thick of it and we're battling that higher power stuff, right? Or not even necessarily higher power, we're just trying to control, right? And that's when you kind of have to release it and then go in the third step and just try to give it, do your best to give it away. But like I said on the last one, it's that tug of war kind of feel, right? And that's the struggle. Right? Like how you say sanity. I was never actually sane, so getting to a place of sanity for me is more achievable than what it was when I was in my addiction. For me, my higher power, I grew up with God as a constant in my life. I went to church on and off. It was something that I always knew was there. And
it's been helpful through the course of my life, letting go of control and recognizing that there is something greater than me, and that helps ground me, especially when I want to control everything. Um, Letting that go and letting God has been instrumental in everything that I do. And there isn't one circumstance over another where it really comes into play. It's just a constant daily reprieve. I wake up, I get up, thanks God, I'm breathing, I'm still alive, I'm still here, I'm in a lot better shape than what I once was. And yeah, the first three steps, you've got to be willing, you've got to let go, and you've got to realize that there are things out there that you you can't manipulate, you can't control with having a positive outcome. I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, it does, because there's just some things that no matter, sometimes when you ask, the answer is no, right? So these things that we, expect in life, or we want to go our way, or we think should go our way, or we think it should be this way because of knowledge in our brain, because we're so sophisticated, right? We get to these points of ego trip and pride where we want things to go, and there's nothing wrong with plans. I mean,
I
God.
remember bargaining with God
Hmm.
when I was little, and even my an adult, I'm like, okay, if you do this for me, I'll do that, and that's really not how it works. It's
No, it's the vending machine God. You know, it doesn't work out. I mean, it beats. No, nothing beats. Not a competition, but nothing beats lighting candles and praying to Satan that you hope you wake up as Spider-Man at the age of 8 or 9.
that's
Uh,
extreme. Do you speak from personal experience?
Yeah, dude, I was a messed up little kid.
Oof, don't go near my candles.
Yeah. So this whole battle tug of war thing we do with our spirituality and trying to connect into a higher purpose, right? I mean, if you're out there and you're struggling with it, it's kind of normal, right? But there is a point where you can find achievable balance, right? And that's why it's a good segue for kind of going into the clarity thing. That's why I chose it after the higher power, because the way we lined it up was, there was trust, and then we went to truth,
Faith.
and then we went to faith, and then we went to higher power. And the reason I chose clarity after it, because when you start doing those things, and not necessarily in that row, in that order, there's a lot of clarity that comes through it. But I will finish up. I will finish up on the higher power. It's like, so this higher power thing is, you go back to what you're saying about the vending machine God. It's,
Your words.
yeah, yeah. Well, my words, yeah. So we get to this point to where it's all ego and pride. It's what we think should be going, or how we think things should go. And like I was saying before, there's nothing wrong with having a plan. God gave us brains to use and execute plans and carry out the things that we have in our day-to-day life, right? And but there's a certain level of expectation that some of us bring with pride and ego that really sets us up for failure, right? A lot of the speaking that we hear in some of these 12-step things is like the premeditated resentments, and how much having an expectation could really set us down the wrong path, because that's just not how the world works, right?
It's unrealistic.
100%. There's a point where you get to this whole higher power business where you really it's really about checking your ego and your pride. That's the focal point of this, because we can get so wrapped up in the way we think everything should be, and we got all these grand plans, but in the thick of it, everybody's on their own journey, right? And when we try to push onto others our own image of what we think life should be,
Agenda.
yeah, then what happens is we miss the mark. We get to this egocentric, and then we push people away,
You
and
start wondering, why don't you believe what I believe?
yeah. And I've always been the type of person that if I have Verizon, well, I'm going to try to talk you into getting Verizon too. Or if I drive this kind of car, then you should really like this car too. And it took me a lot of
That
things to,
tracks.
yeah, it definitely it definitely tracks because that's always how I've always been, right? And
Blocks the lines of communication too. When you start implementing those behaviors and agendas on other people, you block out what other people have to say to you, and then you lack that spiritual growth necessary to keep moving forward.
and the thing about it is it's fucked up because when it works, it's a vicious cycle because most of us wouldn't do this kind of stuff, at least in the negative fashion, if it didn't work. This is like the maladaptive stuff we've learned, and it works. So when you start shifting gears into this kind of lifestyle, you start realizing if I want to become spiritual and I want to have God in my life and I want to live a better life and be a better me and a better version of myself, those things they clash, right? So getting to that zero sum point of just allowing a God into your life and just relinquishing that perceived control that you think you have on a situation, which is really not even real when it comes down to it. Because anytime that I thought I had to figure it out, it's just life's God's little joke in the end to kind of wrap it around to humble me each time. And in the beginning, I used to get real pissed off, and it was a real embarrassing experience. But now it's a little bit better, right? Which leads us to clarity, right? And well, I got my my reader here again, so if you want to. And don't feel afraid to elaborate if you scroll down and see even more, because
Thank you for your permission.
You're very welcome. Hey, permission will be next week.
Any other guidelines here before I read? Certain words you want me to avoid? Okay. So, clarity. I looked up the spiritual meaning of it because that seems more relevant. In a spiritual context, clarity refers to a state of understanding, insight, and discernment, especially concerning spiritual truths and one's relationship with the divine. It involves seeing beyond superficial appearances to grasp deeper meanings and truth, often guided by a higher power or inner wisdom. It breaks it down a little further. Discernment, understanding, clear vision and purpose, confidence and trust, seeking and finding clarity. It also goes into different perspectives and talks about religion, Buddhism, Christianity, and things like that. What I like down here, it says, in essence, spiritual clarity is a valuable tool for personal growth and spiritual development, helping individuals to navigate life's challenges with wisdom, purpose, and a clear understanding of their place in the world and their relationship with the divine. I like how it phrases that, because even though God, quote unquote, has been a constant in my life, I've struggled with really wrapping my head around, like, what does that look like? It is a guy in the sky with brown hair and a beard? Is it a woman? There's just so much, and I decided to put the physical image of God in hindsight and out of my mind or whatever, and just kept it simple and understood that what my higher power, what my God is just something that isn't me, something that's not you, something that's not someone or something. It's just some essence, some entity in the universe that isn't myself. And that's really helped me come to what would be the word? An acceptance of what God is. Makes sense in my brain. It's a tricky concept because there's no tangible, quote unquote proof. You don't, there's so much involved to it, so much religion. I find solace in the fact knowing that it's, for, I guess, the universe. My higher power would be more like the universe.
Well, that's when you dive into the whole trust and faith thing. That's why I did my best to separate the two when I did them back to back, because they're much different, right? Trust is something you can calculate based off of lived and learned experience, focal points in your memory, attitudes, way people show up, their past actions. But faith when you're dealing with something like a higher
It's
power.
not tangible.
Yeah, it really takes that belief without the evidence, and that's what it really takes when you're starting to go into the spirituality and the higher power, because although although right, one of the gifts of your higher power is clarity. That's the reason why that I wanted to bring it up, right? Because so when for me the way clarity works, right? Uh, there's many ways to get there: meditation, prayer. For me, the biggest one for me is working out, right? Um, and I don't just go in there, I'm going to lift weights and I'm going to be all cool, and feel great. No, I go in there understanding that it's my medicine. This is how I heal myself, right? Because
For those of you that don't know Frank, when he doesn't work out, he's a jerk.
yeah, I mean that's the reality of it, right? So the reason I chose clarity, right, is the way I get there is I always find God in that place of clarity and that calm, right? And and the more I can clear the static, let's just say, so that you got a day that goes wrong or you got some bad news that comes in, right? And you got to really lean on these tools, right? And it's not necessarily like clarity is not necessarily a tool, right? It can be, but you have, for me, the way it works is, though I know where I find my clarity at is my religious practice, whether it's prayer, meditation, writing, um, getting into the flow state of some of my podcasts that really help heal my brain, some of the audio books, getting connected into those flow states where I find my higher power, right? And when it's said and done, and I start doing my routines, I hit these pockets of clarity where I can start seeing things, and like we talk about truth, right? Well, that's where I find those moment of clarity is when I could really indulge into the position that I'm truly at, as opposed to something that I'm really just trying to create through my ego and perception, right? And um and clarity is kind of one of those tools that, like, okay, when I'm there, that's when I do my best thinking, right? When I'm in the flow state, that's where I find my clarity. That clarity is the flow state for me. And so what happens for me is when I find myself in these flow states, which does happen often, but when you're bogged down by maybe stress, maybe what your girlfriend said, your boyfriend said, whatever's going on in your life, whatever your coworker said, all these things that could kind of magnetize to your brain, and then when you're laying down at night and it's just the world is heavy, or you get some bad news that somebody died, finding these pockets of clarity are harder and harder, right? So I like to envision it like pit stops, right? When I'm going through my day, and I spoke about this in past podcasts, I go through my day, I find my little pit stops, right? Whether it's just sitting down for a couple minutes, whether it's just my breathing, my fast breathing that I do, the breath of fire, these things where I can find those moment of clarities and reattach me to what I know is my spirit and my soul, right? And that's where I really find myself in those moment of clarities, or moment of clarity. What about you and your clarity over there?
Mm. My brain has been more at ease and more relaxed without having all of these outside things kind of muddle it up. It's a good feeling. And I'm not used to that feeling. And somebody who deals with anxiety and all this stuff that just stacks and stacks and stacks, without the excess noise, without the excess static, I get a clear understanding of my emotion, my headspace, my intentions, my agendas, and kind of where I'm at. Whether that's good, whether that's bad, it's irrelevant, but just kind of knowing how I truly feel and not trying to cover it up and mask it with anything or anyone. And it helps. It just, I'm so happy. I'm so blessed. I'm so fulfilled because I'm okay with who I am today. And it's because of that trust, faith, truth, the relationship with my higher power and letting things go. I'm a better person for it. And the clarity around that is, I don't have words for it.
Mm.
I don't have words for it. I look at my life today and I wouldn't be here happy, fulfilled, blessed, even on my bad days, because God knows I have my bad days. I get real moody, at the drop of a dime, and who knows what that is. But I can get through it so much better than what I used to. And it's because I can recognize those emotions and I don't have the fog, I don't have the veil, I don't have this shroud blocking those emotions anymore. I can feel them, I can get through them, I can get over it.
Mm. That reminds me of what some of my coworkers and I were talking about today. It's there's a harsh reality when we're out there using and boozing, right? We get to this point where hold on, let me get this back up and operational. So when we're out there using and doing the thing, right? What happens is, I guess it's not going to work. I guess. All right. Okay.
You will not know that this will be edited out.
No, I'm gonna leave it. Raw dog it.
Let's see what happens when I assume.
So sorry about that, guys. Technical difficulties.
Never difficulties.
So we were talking about this earlier today. It's like when speaking about people that are still struggling, right? I stayed in that place for so long because I was actually afraid to put in the effort. I was lazy.
Complacent.
Yeah,
Kind of thrive in chaos too.
that too, but it was more for me. It was more like I didn't have the grit to stick it out, right? Because um, there was I was a lazy person. I didn't like struggles. Anytime there was a struggle, I would panic or be fearful. So I really had to get to a point to where there was enough pain to really motivate me to get out of that spot, because you really, like, they talk about that desperation piece, right? It's like, man, things have to hurt just enough for you to go, whoa, okay, so all this stuff is not working anymore. Something needs to change, and immediately, or else it's like all the lights are flashing and the 3 2 1 everything's in chaos is about to go off, right? And sound the alarm, because it's either that or you're gonna die, right? And that's kind of what I went through. And until you can kind of muster up that grit, right, and get around people that can really help you through it, it's more or less, yeah, a lot of the power in the end has to come from you, a lot of that stuff, but you really have to let people in and then open yourself up to the spiritual concept of a higher power, right? And you don't really know that, and in the beginning it's just a lot of self-will and you're just trying to grid by and you do the bare minimum. But once you open yourself up to this process, it's like, but you also have to be ready, right? And that clarity doesn't come for a very long time.
It's gonna come in waves too.
Yeah.
It's not gonna hit you in the face.
Yeah.
Some days will be better than others.
And that's one thing is what I can't wake up and just summon clarity, right? There's
I can.
clarity. Come here, clarity. So the fact is, right, there's a lot of action that needs to be taken to get these moments of clarity, right? To kind of stay in that pocket of the flow state that I like to call it. There's a lot of, I wouldn't say there's a lot of effort. Like, efforting is not the key to it, right? Is finding that place where everything's kind of flowing is the more optimal approach to it. Because if you can find that certain recipe that works with your body, your mind, and your spirit, and it's a lot of give and take. You can't just like think one thing's going to work for infinite amount of time. There's things that worked for my recovery for 2 years and then just stopped working, and I had to kind of change that, right? Until you get hit with those challenges, you're never going to really know what it's all about until the situation arises, right? So you're going to not know to let go of it until it gets like, oh wow, this is something I can't ignore anymore. So for me, it was the anger piece, right? I've done
way better on my anger. I mean, compared to how I was 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, shit, even 6, 7 before I got sober. I mean, I was constantly catching cases of violent crime. So it's like, just to see that progression in yourself is like, it makes it worth it, right? And those also provide those moment of clarity, because sometimes we get lost in our stress, and we're like, we want to do better, and we just kind of get down on ourselves. But then when we take a look in hindsight, we're like, oh, like, this is what I used to be. I mean, I know I had an outburst today, but my outbursts are way different, right? My outbursts are like, before I just get aggressive and possibly violent, but now today it's just like I say something snooty and I just kind of try to avoid the situation and get away from it because I know myself. So it's like, but just seeing that progression, right? It's kind of, it makes it all worth it in the end, because it's like, man, now I don't have to go to jail, right? Because that was what my decisions made. Like, mine was quick, hurry, in a panic, and in fear and anger, right? And just to be away from that and in these pockets of clarity that's where I find most use. That's where I find myself most useful to everyone around me, and also myself.
I think it's important to stay willing. And one thing that I think we were talking about over the weekend is remaining teachable. And that's something in my professional side of life that I've had to learn, because for me, recovery, life, work, I get to a place where I feel good, but then I plateau and I am complacent and I get lazy and I get comfortable. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it also starts to block the process of remaining open, remaining willing, and remaining teachable. I can't stress that enough, because for me, I get to that place, it gets blocked off, and then I start reverting back to old behaviors. And that's not the person that I want to be. That's not what I'm doing all this work for. So I have to remain open and teachable and adapt to those changes. Like you were saying, those for you every 2 years, what recovery looked like for you 2 years ago, what worked then may not work now. And recognizing that and moving forward and figuring out, well, why isn't this working? Why did it work then? Why isn't it working now? What's changed? What's different? And clarity comes in. You can step back, you can take a look, and oh, this is different. Oh, okay, well, let me see if I do this. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. That's also where a support group and these podcasts, these groups, these meetings, that support network that you create throughout your life, whether it's through one organization or another, can be really helpful, because they might have gone through what you're going through, and where they're at in life at that moment in time may be exactly what you need now.
Mm.
And yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. Like, something you outgrew, and then someone comes to your doorstep, whether it be a sponsee or just somebody and
They
you're
could have 24 hours clean,
yeah.
and then they're approaching something differently, and you're like, "Oh my God, that situation, that solution, I'm gonna try that."
Yeah.
7 years in.
Yeah. Well, the whole concept of you're no longer dealing with it, but then someone comes into your view where they're dealing with it, and that's where this whole experience, strength, and hope is important, right? Um, so like, there's people that I know that I'm like, oh, well, elaborate on that, and like, my sponsor drives me crazy with that shit. I'm just like, okay, I'll ask him a question, whether it be on here or just, he's like, well, it's just part of my life now, and um, I'm just, like, this whole, I'm just living the program and it's living. I said, that's cool. That's great. I'm glad you're there. But how the fuck do I get there? Right? Break it down for me a little bit. It's cool to
He's just like, "Watch me. Follow me around for a day and you'll know."
Yeah. But it's just like one of those things. Okay, tell me your experience. How did you get out of that? Like, yeah, that sounds all butterflies and rainbows. That's great. I would love to read that on a Hallmark card. But
I'm sure you can.
where we're at, it's a little bit more gritty, right? And I'm sure, well, there's, in a lot of ways, I can see what he's saying, right? And that's why he's my sponsor. And I'm just like, okay. Well, sometimes you just bite your tongue and you're just like, oh, all right, whatever. But there's a reason why I sponsor the way I sponsor today, is because there was a lot of questions that gone unanswered, and not everybody could meet your level of standard, but today I try to, with the help of the book, is just kind of explain the roadmap. And it's just like, okay, I kind of was lost during this, and this is what I wish got showed to me when I was doing it, like a more structured version of it instead of just, whimsical hoity-toity. And
That's
so,
the cool thing about the steps and the sponsorship relationship, because I remember, I mean, I've gone through the steps officially one time, and I'm not as active in that department in comparison to you, and I could always be better. But what I've noticed is you can hire and fire sponsors and vice versa. It can sometimes takes a few time. Can take more than one time to find the right fit. And you don't necessarily have to go through a full set to get to that point. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I think being adamant and communicating that and going through it a couple of times and kind of, let's do this different next time, or let me get something out of that person. It's the nice thing is it's not a one and done thing. You can do it as many times as you feel like you need to or want to or are encouraged to do.
yeah. Well, I know that we're kind of in a time constraint, so we'll be wrapping it up here shortly. The whole clarity piece. If you're out there, I challenge you to seek those moments of clarity. Right?
Get the cotton out of your ears.
Yeah, get the cotton out of your ears. Well, the thing is, right, is it takes action to kind of get to those moment of clarity. And even if the action is, I'm not talking about effort. I'm talking about action. Effort's a whole different thing. Yeah, that coincides with it. But we're talking about action. Action can be just as something as just shutting your mouth. That's an action right there. You restrain from speaking. And what happens is you can listen, whether it's for God's message or the message within, right? Or direction for where you're going to go in life. And if things get hard, right? Sometimes that less static, shut your mouth and get into that meditative mode, right? Or get into that prayer mode, however you have to connect with it. But it doesn't have to be this intense effort, right? That's basically what I'm trying to say is sometimes a little action can get you a long way. So I challenge you guys out there to seek these moment of clarities through these tools that you learn. Basically, if you stop doing your gratitude list and you know that's what gets you to those moment of clarities, do it. If you stop doing step work and you know that gets you to those moments of clarity, do it. If you know certain meetings help you out in that department, get to those meetings, right? Because it's not a competition. It's about personal growth and your personal journey. And if you know that you know where you're at in those moments of clarity and how you are a better person for it when you do these tasks that get you well and medicated, right? Without the drugs. Like we're doing this now to stay spiritually well instead of mentally sick, because that's where I get to when my spirit's out of whack, my mental is completely off the hook. So I challenge you guys out there to do due diligence, do your program, and and drop some comments down below and let me know how your moments of clarity kind of developed for you this week. Did you want to add anything before we jump off here?
No, I'm hungry.
All right, she's hungry. You heard it here on F.D. Recovery. All right. Like, subscribe, share. This is Frank and
Shelly
with F.D. Recovery. Let's tune in next week. Peace.
Thank you for tuning in to F.D. Recovery. A reminder, be kind to yourself on this journey of recovery. Also, call your sponsor. Get connected to local support groups. And for one day at a time, stay clean and sober.